This isn't just a story. It's a journey, one that'll stay with you long after the video ends. So if you've ever felt love, loss, betrayal, or hope, then stay with us. Because this story deserves to be heard from the very first second to the very last. If this video moves you, even for a moment, please give it a like. Leave a comment telling us which part hit you the hardest, and share it with someone who needs to feel something real today. And if you love stories that are raw, emotional, and unforgettable, then subscribe to the channel. Because we don't just tell stories here, we bring them to life.
The bus rolled into Ashford, Tennessee, with a soft hiss of brakes and the smell of red clay after morning rain. Hank Dalton stepped off slowly, cane in one hand, leather satchel in the other. His body, once built like a soldier's, had softened with age. His back ached more than it didn't. And yet his eyes, those deep storm-gray eyes, still searched for something lost. 50 years. That's how long it had been. Since he'd last stood in this town. Since he'd last seen her. He adjusted the old military cap on his head and walked toward the town square, passing the same barber shop, the same bakery, the same old oak tree he once carved her initials into. MP plus HD. 1969. The carving was faded now, worn with time. But it was still there. Just like she was. Maggie Palmer stood in the kitchen of the Palmer farmhouse, her hands gently kneading biscuit dough as sunlight spilled through the lace curtains. Her long gray hair was twisted into a soft braid down her back. She moved with quiet grace, like someone who had lived a full life, and still carried its weight. A knock came at the door. She wiped her hands on a towel and opened it slowly. There he was. Older. Weathered. But unmistakably him. Her chest tightened. "Hello, Margaret," Hank said softly, voice low and gravelly. She stared at him for a long moment before stepping aside. "Well," she said, "you better come in. Biscuits'll be cold in 10 minutes. They sat at the kitchen table, neither eating much, both stealing glances when the other wasn't looking. "This house hasn't changed a bit," Hank said, eyes scanning the wooden beams, the faded quilt over the couch, the framed photo of Maggie's parents still hanging by the door. "I could say the same about you," she said with a raised eyebrow. "You've still got that cocky slouch." He chuckled. "It's less cocky now. More arthritis." She smiled, but only briefly. Silence settled between them again. The kind of silence that had history in it. Finally she asked, "Why are you here, Hank?" He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small wooden box, wrapped in navy blue ribbon. "I made a promise," he said, sliding it across the table. "To someone I lost." Maggie didn't touch it. "Not yet." "To who?" "My wife," he replied. "Eleanor." Her eyes didn't flicker. But her hands tightened slightly. "You married." "I did," he said gently. "In 76. She passed last year." "I'm sorry." "So was I," he replied. Maggie exhaled long and slow. "She must have been something special." "She was," Hank said, voice thickening. "But she wasn't you." That cracked her. She looked away, blinking fast. "You can't just come back here and say things like that." "I'm not trying to start something," he said. "I came to finish something." She finally touched the box. Fingers trembling, she untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, dozens of old letters, yellowed, ink faded. Her name written in the same handwriting across every envelope. Margaret Palmer. Margaret Palmer. Margaret Palmer. He stared at them like ghosts. "I wrote them all," Hank said quietly. "From the ship. From base. From every damn place I landed during those years. But I never sent them." "Why?" "Because I thought I'd ruined us. Because your father ran me out of town. Because I thought you'd moved on." She opened one. "Dear Margaret, we saw the stars tonight over Okinawa. All I could think about was your hands in mine." Her fingers shook. She closed it. "You left without saying goodbye." "I know. You let me think you stopped loving me." "I never did," he whispered. "Not for a single day." Maggie stood, heart pounding. "I waited for you for years," she said. And when I finally stopped, it almost killed me. I know, he said. I'm sorry. She turned away. Hank stayed seated. So silent. Then softly. She told me before she died that if I had unfinished business I needed to face it. I couldn't die with her in my heart and you in my shadow. Maggie closed her eyes. The tears came quiet. Like old friends who'd waited long enough. In the evening light she walked him to the door. Neither said much. But as he turned to leave she called after him. You still remember where the tree is? He smiled. Always. She nodded once. I'll meet you there tomorrow. The oak tree stood just past the edge of the old county line, where the land turned golden in the evening and the crickets began to sing before the stars showed up. It hadn't changed. Not much. Still tall. Still strong. Still holding the secrets of two wild hearts who once swore they'd never leave each other. Hank arrived first, leaning his cane against the bark. He stood there running his hand over the old carving, now aged and rough but still legible. MP plus HD. 1969. The year they fell in love. The year everything started. And ended. Maggie arrived a few minutes later, wearing a faded denim jacket and boots coated in soft earth. Her hair was still braided. Still long. Still his favorite thing in the world. She walked up beside him and placed a hand on the carving. They stood there in silence, letting the memory wash over them. You remember that night? Hank asked softly. Maggie smiled. You had a bottle of stolen moonshine and a head full of ideas. And you had that little red dress, he chuckled. The one your daddy hated. He hated you more, she said, glancing sideways. He wasn't wrong, Hank replied. Back then at least. You weren't bad. Just scared, she whispered. I was terrified, he admitted. Of the draft. Of losing you. Of becoming something I didn't understand. They sat at the base of the tree, the same place they once shared kisses and plans and secrets they thought no one else could ever understand. Summer 1969. Maggie snuck out her bedroom window at 1:06 a.m. Hank was waiting with the truck engine off, headlights dimmed. She slid in barefoot and he grinned like he'd won the world. They drove past the cornfields down to the creek and parked beneath the stars. She was the preacher's daughter. He was the mechanic's kid with too much charm and no direction. But together, they were fireworks waiting to happen. That night they lay on the truck bed, fingers interlocked, music from the radio whispering slow country love songs. I don't want to wait anymore, Maggie whispered. For life. For love. For anything. Hank turned to her. Then don't, he said. Their kisses deepened. Hands roamed. Hearts pounded. And when they finally gave themselves to each other under the Tennessee stars, it wasn't wild or reckless. It was tender. Sacred. Two souls promising each other forever, without knowing how short forever could be. Back to present. I think about that night more than I care to admit, Maggie said softly. So do I, Hank replied. A breeze swept through the branches above, rustling memories that never quite faded. You know, she added, I kept the records. Every song we danced to. You still dance. She looked at him, one eyebrow raised. I'm 76, Hank. My hips say no. But my heart still sways. He smiled. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in velvet. What's that? He asked. She handed it to him. Inside the locket. The one she wore every day in 1969. With their photo inside. Both of them laughing, his arm around her shoulder, her eyes closed in joy. I never threw it away, she said. Even when I thought you forgot. Hank's eyes filled. I never forgot a single thing. They sat there, old bones on old grass, the weight of years between them. But as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky turned gold, Hank reached for her hand. It still fit. Worn, wrinkled, familiar. But perfect. You ever wonder, he said, if maybe some love stories aren't meant to be burned hot and fast, but to burn slow, she finished, and last a lifetime. They sat in silence watching the light fade. Two people. Two promises. And 50 years of love, still alive in a single touch. The next morning, Maggie brewed fresh coffee just like she always had. 1 scoop strong, 1 scoop bold. She stood in the kitchen in her cotton robe, the one with faded sunflowers on the pocket, staring at the empty second mug she hadn't used in decades. Today she filled it. At 8:03 a.m. Hank knocked gently. She opened the door without asking who it was. He walked in like he used to, like there'd never been a half-century gap between shared mornings. They sat on her porch with their coffee, watching the sky warm from gray to blue. And then she asked the question neither of them had touched yet. Why didn't you ever come back sooner? Hank looked out toward the fields. I was a coward, he said simply. Maggie didn't interrupt. I got stationed in Guam after boot camp. Wrote you every night. And then one day, I got a letter back. Not from you. From your daddy. She blinked. You never told me that. He wrote that if I ever loved you I'd leave you alone. That you'd moved on. That you didn't need some dropout sailor wrecking your future. Maggie set her mug down. He never showed me that letter. I know, Hank said. I found out years later, after my first heart attack. Eleanor, my wife, found my old journal. She made me read it back to myself. That's when I realized I never really came home. I just survived in places that didn't look like you. Maggie sat back, letting the words settle into her chest like stones in a river. I used to go to the mailbox every day that summer, she whispered. Waited like a fool. Thought maybe you'd forgotten me. Maybe you were gone for good. I never was. She nodded, swallowing thick emotion. That night you left. I was late. He turned toward her, confused. Late. She looked down at her hands. I never told anyone. Not even my mama. But I missed my cycle. I was almost sure I was pregnant. Hank froze. Maggie looked up. But the bleeding came a few weeks later. I was alone. And I hated you for it, even though I didn't understand why. His voice cracked. Maggie. I buried it, she said. The pain. The possibility. All of it. They sat in silence. The kind of silence that's only possible between two people who've held a lifetime of words inside. Then slowly Hank pulled a folded envelope from his coat pocket. One she hadn't seen yet. This was the last one I wrote, he said. Before I stopped trying. He hesitated, then opened it. Margaret, if I never see you again, just know that every beat of my heart since 1968 was for you. Not the woman they told me to forget, but the girl who kissed me in the rain, who carved our names in a tree, and who I promised forever to before I knew how long forever really was. Maggie's eyes filled as she folded the letter gently, like something sacred. And then she looked up at him. I never stopped loving you, she whispered. I know, he said, voice thick. She reached for his hand. And I'm tired of pretending that time owes us anything. He nodded. So what do we do? She smiled. We start where we left off. Even if it's a shorter story this time. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it, soft, reverent. That night she made dinner. Fried catfish. Mashed potatoes. Blackberry cobbler for dessert. Hank stayed until long after the dishes were clean. And when he stood at the door ready to leave, Maggie stopped him. Do you still have the locket? He pulled it from under his shirt. The same chain, same photo, same girl with her eyes closed, laughing. She stepped forward and kissed him, not like a memory. Like a decision. You can stay, she whispered. If you want. I've wanted to stay since 1969, he said. And this time, he didn't leave. The next few weeks felt like someone had turned back time. Maggie laughed more. The air felt lighter. And the old farmhouse, once too quiet, now echoed with the clinking of coffee mugs, the creak of Hank's cane against wood floors, and the soft shuffle of two people rediscovering how to live. They cooked breakfast together. He burned the toast, she teased him. They danced barefoot in the kitchen to old vinyl records that crackled like fire. And every night they sat on the porch wrapped in the same quilt, counting stars like they were blessings instead of regrets. One night after a long walk to the creek, Hank said, If we had a child, what do you think they'd be like? Maggie paused. Stubborn like me. Gentle like you. Wild like both. They smiled. There was no sadness. only imagining what could have been, and being at peace with what was. That night they slept in the same bed. Not for lust. For closeness. For warmth. For the kind of safety that only comes when you've known someone in all seasons of your life. He kissed her shoulders. She ran her fingers through his thinning hair. And before they drifted off he whispered, "You saved me, Maggie." "You just came home," she whispered back. "That's all I ever wanted." But peace rarely comes without interruption. The letter arrived on a rainy Wednesday. It came in a plain white envelope with no return address, addressed to Margaret Palmer, written in the slanted cursive she hadn't seen in over 40 years. She read the sender's name and felt her stomach twist. Liza Dalton. Hank's daughter. She hesitated, then opened it. "Dear Miss Palmer, I don't know what my father has told you, but I know he came to see you. I begged him not to. He's not well. He doesn't tell people, but I know things you don't. I found the letters, the ones he never sent. And I found your name in his journal, over and over. You should know that he kept loving you at the expense of everyone else. Even my mother. He knew. He always knew. And it destroyed her." Maggie sat down, the letter trembling in her hands. "I'm not writing out of anger. Just honesty. He's a good man. But he's not just yours. He's a father. A grandfather. And he hasn't told you everything. Please don't let the past ruin what peace he has left. Eliza." Maggie folded the letter. Her heart beat unsteadily. That evening she didn't speak of it. He made dinner. They ate. They played cards. But when they sat on the porch, Hank sensed something had shifted. "You're quiet," he said. She didn't answer right away. Then gently, "Why didn't you tell me about your daughter?" He sighed. Long, heavy. "She wasn't supposed to know. But she does. I loved Eleanor," he said. "But not like I loved you. And that wasn't fair to her." Maggie looked at him. "Did you ever try?" "I tried to forget you," he said. "I tried to love someone else the same. But the heart doesn't listen." "And Eliza?" Maggie asked. "She deserves a father who isn't half here and half in a memory." "I've been trying to fix that too," he said. "Before I go." Maggie's face tightened. "What do you mean?" He looked down. "I didn't come here just to say goodbye to you. I came because the doctor said I may not have another spring." Her eyes welled instantly. "No. I didn't want you to pity me. I just wanted to feel like I mattered, to someone who once made me feel alive." She stood up, walked to the porch edge, tears streaming silently. He didn't follow. He sat still, letting the pain breathe. "I came back to die, Maggie," he said softly. "But being with you made me feel like I came back to live." That night they lay side by side, neither sleeping. And somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m. Maggie whispered into the dark, "I'm not afraid of you dying." "I am," he whispered back. "I'm afraid of letting you leave without knowing you were loved until the very last breath." He reached for her hand. Held it tight. "I know that now." The sun rose slowly over Ashford the next morning, golden and gentle, like it knew time was short. Maggie woke alone. She reached to the other side of the bed, still warm from where Hank had laid just hours earlier. But he was already dressed, sitting on the porch in his old navy cap, watching the birds flutter over the frozen fields. She stepped out quietly, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "You couldn't sleep either?" she asked. He shook his head. Didn't want to waste the time. She sat beside him. They didn't speak for a while. Just held hands. "I've got a favor to ask," Hank said softly. "Anything." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope, sealed with red wax. "Give this to Eliza. When I'm gone." Maggie hesitated. "You should give it to her yourself." He shook his head. "She'll listen to you." Her eyes filled, but she nodded. "Okay." He turned to her, eyes glinting with something between pain and peace. "You gave me more joy in the last month than I've had in years." She placed a hand on his chest. "You gave me back something I thought I lost forever." They spent that day in quiet, slow rituals. He fixed the squeaky back door she'd been ignoring for a decade. She baked him her mama's apple pie recipe, the one he loved when they were kids. They played a hand of cards. listened to Otis Redding on the old radio, laughed at the same jokes they'd laughed at in 1969. And when the stars came out, they danced, barefoot, in the living room, her cheek pressed to his chest, his hands wrapped around her waist. No music needed, just memory. She could feel how tired he was. She could feel what was coming. But she didn't speak it into existence. That night, just before sleep, he asked her something so soft she almost missed it. "Do you think heaven has a place by the creek?" She smiled, kissed his knuckles. "If it doesn't, I'll plant one." He smiled. And slept. Hank Dalton passed away in the early morning hours. Peacefully. With Maggie's hand in his. A smile on his lips. And the locket still around his neck. The funeral was small. Just a few old Navy buddies. A few town locals. Maggie. And Eliza. Maggie didn't say much when they met. Just handed her the letter after the service, pressed into her palm. Eliza read it sitting alone on the church steps. She cried. Not the kind of cry you run from. The kind you grow into. Later that afternoon she hugged Maggie. "I never understood him," Eliza whispered. "But I think you did." "I never stopped," Maggie said. Eliza nodded. "Thank you for loving him when he forgot how." That spring Maggie returned to the oak tree. A simple wooden plaque had been added beneath the carving. Henry Dalton. 1945 to 2023. Some love lasts beyond the breath. She placed fresh flowers at its base and sat for a long time, remembering, not just the man he became, but the boy who once kissed her under fireworks and promised her the moon without knowing how to give it. He had given her something better. Time. Closure. A love that outlived silence. Later that year a letter arrived at Maggie's home. Inside was a plane ticket. A note from Eliza. "I want to show you where he raised me. I want you to see the parts of him I never understood, and I want to understand the parts you did." Maggie stared at it for a long time, then smiled. Love, she realized, doesn't end when a heart stops beating. It lingers. It passes on. It roots itself in others. It lasts. Because the greatest kind of love is the kind that doesn't need forever. Just enough time to mean something that never fades.